Doug Giddings. Doug is the Idaho County Sheriff, and we welcome you to the committee, and go ahead.
Thank you. Doug Giddings, Sheriff of Idaho County for the last 5 years. And I'm here today to share maybe a couple of situations that have occurred in Idaho County. And I want you to understand these are just my, I guess you'd say, my decisions that I make upon these situations that occur. As an elected sheriff, I enforce local and state law. I don't enforce federal law. I'm not required to. I actually couldn't if I wanted to. But my primary focus as a sheriff is to enforce any violation to the citizens of my county where their constitutional rights are violated. That's number one. However, when federal, or I should say, and then when federal agencies start making rules and regulations and they become heavy-handed, and I'll say this in a different way when they talk about the fines. If you had a traffic violation and we charge you $10,000, that would be really heavy-handed. When you put garbage in the wrong dumpster and a federal officer writes you a ticket, it's $500 unless you plead not guilty. Then it can be 1 year in federal prison or $10,000. So which do you think you do? Some of the rules just seem arbitrary, and they, in my opinion, the way I was brought up and tend to believe, is they're just arbitrary. There's some man making that rule. The way I was raised is we have elected officials. They elect me, we elect you, you make the rules. We hire people that are answerable to the people. That's the way it's supposed to work. The federal agencies, and in this case I'm talking about law enforcement or regulation enforcement, they don't answer to the people. They don't answer to anybody. Well, yes, they do. They answer to the person that they work for. And I've had more than one discussion, usually somewhat adversarial, is that they don't answer to the people. And that's not the way our government's supposed to work, in my opinion. And that causes real stress on the folks that the federal agencies are working with. If you've ever been stopped by a federal law enforcement officer, you will get a quick overview of how it works, because I would guess that you don't have any idea how it works right now. I didn't either when I became sheriff, and I've been in law enforcement since I was 25, and I'm 68. Add that up. That's a long time. You just don't know how it works, and once you're caught in it, you lose. The folks that they hire are usually not local. They come into this area, wherever you are. In my county, I'm referring. There is no administrator. For example, EPA. There are no, I asked somebody out in the hall, have you ever seen an EPA person? Well, of course not. Where are they? Well, maybe there's one here, I don't know. But nobody knows, unless you happen to work with them. But they have, not investigators, but inspectors. So an inspector will come and look at your dredge. And what rule does he go by? I don't know. Nobody has a copy of those rules. He'll take pictures, make his report, and then he leaves. You think you're good. You're not, because you're going to get a letter in the mail that you owe X number of dollars if you don't get that dredge out, or whatever they decide. Whatever that inspector and the person who is his boss, which is in this case Seattle. I'm not sure that the people in Seattle understand the local, I guess you would say, the local process, the local people, their mentality. They don't even understand the local government or the local environment. They're not from Boise, although there are some in Boise, but they probably weren't born and raised here. Probably born like the one is from Alaska. You will get an EPA violation in the mail if you so violate. You don't deal with anybody individually. As the sheriff, I stand as the gap between the people that I represent and was elected to represent and the person who is putting the hammer on you or on the individual who was not elected. He doesn't really care what you have to say unless he just personally cares, because he doesn't answer to you. He answers to his boss, who answers to his boss, who answers to his boss, none of which are elected officials. There's nobody local to listen to. You may have one if you switch agencies, you go over to the BLM or something, then they will have a local person there, but they also don't answer to the people. They answer to their boss. I won't repeat what the gentleman said before about the DEQ's, this Department of Environmental Quality. They've done studies. There's been numerous studies done. The EPA blames the U.S. fisheries for the rules that the EPA requires to fill the permit to dredge. I don't know who makes these rules. They weren't that way 10 years ago. Supposedly they used the Clean Water Act from 40 years ago. I don't know who makes these rules, but I don't think you do, and I don't think our senators and congressmen, I don't think they do either. I don't think any elected official, because apparently the EPA has the permission to make rules, so they hire somebody who's all-knowing, and he makes the rules to make sure that these people are all safe and that their rivers are clear and the birds are safe and the endangered species all live quietly, peacefully in the river. But that's not true in my opinion. I don't think that they use good, I guess you'd say, analogies or good information, because it's kind of like having two psychiatrists in court. One says the guy, he's crazy, I've tested him, and the other, hired by the opposing team, says he's not crazy, he's just fine. So science can go either direction, depends on which side you're on, whether you like it or not. They claim the danger to the river by these dredges. And I say, and I'm not a scientist, and I don't know the dredging rules and environmental rules and all that, but I tell you there's one fire or one blowout, which we have, I would say, at least 1, 2, 3, 4 every year. Those will do more damage to the Salmon River or the Clearwater River or any other river than all the dredgers that you could dream up, and it's just, there's no comparison. If you've been on a fire and you see what happens after a fire, if you've seen a blowout, if you've ever been up toward our direction, Idaho County, and you see the river and all of a sudden it's just brown, you can't see it at all. It's absolutely filthy from a blowout. All the dredges in the world can't make that happen. And you know what? There's still salmon in there, and there's still steelhead, and there's still dredgers, and it's just some bad science they're using to cut the dredgers out, I believe. They claim that it does damage to the fish. It does damage to the bullhead trout. Jet boats do damage too. That's next. Because when a jet boat screams up the river, causes a wave and it kicks up dirt that's on the side, it's actually not in the river. It's just some crazy ways they make rules, and I don't think it's really the rule or the science that does it. I think it's an ideology, and when you have a certain belief, you will make rules to match that belief. One of them I got this last week, one of the reasons they're closing the Salmon River is there's too much mercury in it. The mercury in it is natural, it comes out of the ground up the river. There's not too much mercury in it, it's the way it is. In fact, the dredgers take mercury out if they find it. Naturally occurring, can't change that. The feds and their lawmaking and their law enforcing, they have very poor communication with the people of, in my case, Idaho County. In fact, they don't communicate with them because they're not there. They're behind locked doors. Or they're in their trucks driving by, and they don't communicate. They don't say what's going on. They just enforce these rules, and they have a book of rules that you didn't make, I don't make. I don't even know what they are. And that includes not just the EPA. When I ask for information from the EPA, they send me a whole boatload of stuff telling me why they have the authority to come into my county and inspect and fine the dredgers. And so I send them a copy of my book, the ones that you wrote, and tell them what I can do if I catch them in my county. Now, I knew I was safe in saying that. I knew it was behind me. And I talked to the trooper in the back just in case. I'm going to throw this out, and then I'll be done. Their rules and regulations are not acceptable to, I would say, the majority of people, especially in Idaho County. You may have some bad ideas about Idaho County, but it's awesome. 8,503 square miles of absolute beauty. Tons and tons of water running everywhere. But this is what I believe. When I say they, in this case, I'm talking about the EPA. They want us out of the river because the reasons they use to get us out of the river are not valid. They want us out of the river, so it doesn't matter the excuse. They want us out of the river. And like I said earlier, I think the jet boats are next, and if the fishermen don't quit putting lead in there, the fishermen will be next. They want to control the folks. They want to control their access to the river. And if you don't think that's happening now, it's because you're not ever out on the river. They do control access. This is a good example. It's like, how do you fill a bucket if all you have is a drip? Well, you leave it under the faucet long enough, and that one drip at a time will fill the bucket. And they do one drip at a time. In law enforcement, in regulations, they change the regulation on a monthly, yearly, whatever. Regulation's not the same this year as it was last year. They change it. Who changed it? Somebody. It's either a new guy that came in and said, hey, we can change it and keep them out. So I guess their wording to us in a very quiet, simple, hushed way is to stay out of the river. It's also stay out of the forest. I don't know if you've noticed that or not, but the regulations to stay out of the forest, they close roads. Why do they close roads? To keep you safe. Keep the trees safe, keep the animals safe, keep the side of the hill safe. And I look up in the mountains and tell them, you've got to be kidding. That doesn't mean we don't need regulation. We do. We all need regulation. You need regulation at home. You have regulations for your kids, and we have regulations for the people, so we behave. But most people do behave. And I don't like, and I know the folks of Idaho County don't like being treated like ignorant, that they're not going to behave. Sheriff's Department takes care of those that do misbehave. There's an elite few, and I shouldn't say environmentalists because I don't call them elite, but there's a few, and they have a lot of money, and they want to control, as a quote, the ignorant masses. And if you really look at it, there are a lot of people that really don't know what's going on. And why don't they? Because it's tough to know what's going on. I mean, you guys write the Idaho Code, and I guarantee you don't know what's in it. I think I've heard that before. It's tough. And the Forest Service, they have their own book, and I don't even know what's in it. Every time I go to the forest, I know I'm doing something wrong. And if you read the book, you'll find out you are. Like, can you cut wood out of a slash pile? Yes, you can. But you can also get a ticket for it, so it just depends. It's very insulting and demeaning when the federal lawmakers, rule makers, regulation makers make these rules and regulations, and we have to abide by them, and we don't even know what for, given some, I don't know what you would call it. I just say reason. It's given a reason. If you believe it, most people try to believe. We trust. I was raised to trust. Through school, you're raised to trust and believe what you're taught. I guess the problem is I went to Cal Poly, and they're teaching something different over at Berkeley. It's kind of becoming not the system that I was raised under. It's not the governing system that I think that our constitutional republic allows us to have. You don't want me making rules for you, because if you do, then I'm going to make the rules from where I stand politically and every other way. And if you don't believe in what I believe in and I make rules against you, you want to have some say. Call the government. I have his number right here. Call the EPA. Who are you going to talk to? You're going to talk to somebody that has no clue what you're talking about, unless it affects them directly. These situations, in my opinion, are escalating, and they are intensifying. And it's my job to represent the people, and I hope that you will take what I've said and what the other gentlemen have said and utilize it in your thinking when you make your decisions regarding such things as water, forest, and the citizens, because that's who we represent. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you coming.